Hey, this is Adam Torres, and I'm here to tell you that it has never been easier to start your very own podcast. At Mission Matters, our goal is to amplify stories that matter. That means we want to help you start your podcast because your story matters. We can do this in 3 different ways. 1, join our podcast school and take a free or paid course. 2, visit our resources page where we've already figured out what you need, such as where to host your podcast. Or 3, heck, we can even do everything for you through our podcast agency, including editing for cheaper than you can do in-house. Oh, and no contract, service is month to month. Get started by heading over to missionmatters.com and click on Start a Podcast. All right, now let's get into the show. Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Business Podcast, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres. Keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so I have Mark Souza on the line, and he's CEO over at Revolution Global. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. Really appreciate the opportunity to spend the afternoon with you.
All right, Mark. So we have a big topic on our hands today, and only so much we could do in a 15-minute podcast episode, but I'm excited to get as far on this one as we can. So modern cannabis cultivation and the future of U.S. cannabis, I mean, big topic on a lot of people's minds. But before we get into that, I do want to go a little bit further into what you're doing over at Revolution Global. So tell us a little bit more about your company, please.
I appreciate the opportunity, Adam. And again, thanks for having me. It's a very interesting question because what I do is no different than a number of my fellow CEOs in helping to steward and run an emerging company in an emerging industry. And I think that's one of the most exciting things that anybody can do in building a business, in the fact that we get to do it while also building an industry. That is very unique. The last time we saw that happen, although there were some very different nuances, was in the emergence of the .com and internet industries. But obviously cannabis has its own unique properties, and we can get into that in the different subject matter. But it's been a very interesting run for me as a CEO and a senior executive in helping to develop not only our company as it evolved first in the state of Illinois and became a bigger and bigger part of the supply chain and the competitive industry that is here, but also having grown up as a company under such tight constraints and a great regulatory framework that was birthed here, that we were able to remain competitive, although a little bit slower than some of our other big names here in Illinois. We liked the opportunity of what it offered to us, how it educated us as operators, and what we were able to do as we went forward to operate and get our footprints in other states. So that's kind of a macro concept of how we see the world and how I have to face my day-to-day here at the company, but more importantly in helping everybody that's part of the Revolution team become better stewards and better competitors in an industry that continues to grow.
No, that's awesome. And then, so what are your, a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, executives listening to this. Some have varying levels of interest in the space. What are like your core products and/or like offerings, just to give people a deeper dive into Revolution Global?
Sure. So we're a science-based health and wellness company at our core. That's how we approach cannabis, no different than if we were afforded the opportunity to approach either pharma or organic foods. We would probably approach those spaces in the same way. We take our responsibility very seriously because we were birthed out of the medical cannabis program and having to understand not only what we were giving patients to provide relief, efficacy, safety, all the things that are important in providing medication are things that continue to filter through our approach to build a business and build our product offerings so that they were exactly or as close to what our patients needed. In turn, that allowed us to evolve as the industry expanded into adult use to discovering things that are even more demanded by recreational users, but again, applying the same consumer safety and organics to what it is that we're putting into consumers' hands. So with that being said, we always are looking for not only better product quality, we have a very robust genetics program and science program. We do everything in-house, and that filters all the way down to product delivery and efficacy. So if you think about what are the next evolutions of how do people get cannabinoids into their system, getting them away from the lung, maybe even trying to transfer out of the human digestive tract so we can ensure greater efficacy. And, we continue to work on things that, somewhere between subcutaneous and cutaneous delivery mechanisms are things that we continue to experiment with. But to give you a specific example, right now our product offerings are everything from high-grade flower all the way down to edibles, certain types of pills, and topicals. So that's kind of where we focus and continue to see consumer-driven feedback and demand drive our research and product development.
Fantastic. And I wanted to set the stage for this because I think the topic's important. So modern cannabis cultivation, the future of U.S. cannabis. So what are you seeing in the industry? Because you're in this space day in and day out, operating this this growing company. What are you seeing right now that's interesting?
That's a big question, Ed, and I want to give it its due. But I see two different things happening. And we'll spend some time later on, I hope, going over, the evolution of all things that are regulatory and political. But relative to the actual operations of the industry, one of the things that I see that's happening in real time is what I consider the institutionalization of an industry right before our very eyes. You think about how do you bring large-scale production to a supply chain that is not allowed to have interstate commerce. So each footprint that you develop, you have to make sure that you're operating within the constraints of those regulatory frameworks on a state-by-state basis, but then do your best as a licensed operator and steward within that jurisdiction to do your best to be a robust part of that for the consumer. Obviously we have our responsibilities to the regulatory authorities, to the state, and as good stewards and taxpayers, but ultimately what we're doing is providing products for our medical and our adult use consumers. So in the early part of my answer in this institutionalization of the supply chain, what I think we're seeing that's very positive for consumers is, the development of these supply chains in all these jurisdictions at a scale that, even prior to the federal relief that we're going to get into later, that is allowing the industry to continue to grow, be good stewards, be there for all levels of consumers, and do it at a level that really kind of takes the gray and black market out of a previously tainted industry.
Let's go further down that line of policy and things that you're seeing there, whether it's the federal thing or otherwise. So what's interesting to you in that space?
So it's another great question, Adam, and I appreciate it coming not just from you, but maybe there's some information that we can provide here to your listeners. But, like a number of my fellow CEOs, a good portion of our time is also devoted not just to running our company and M&A activity, but also on government relations. So I've had, the distinct pleasure in the previous career of being a registered lobbyist for my industry in Washington. And when I was brought on to Revolution, took up the same responsibilities here at our company, not only on a state level, wherever we operate, but also on a federal level in Washington, D.C. And so not only do I have those conversations directly on behalf of the company, but I sit on the board of directors of one of the oldest cannabis lobbying organizations that's based in Washington called the Marijuana Policy Project. With that being said, my unique perspective on some of the heartbeats or pulses of what I see going on that are important right now are two things. On a local level, we're seeing more and more states start to roll out their own programs, and we like to do our best to be a part of that conversation. We find that regulation actually goes hand in hand with a couple of things that not only dovetail off of social equity and criminal justice reform, but also consumer safety, and ultimately what states are trying to do in some way, shape, or form is find a way of capturing some additional new tax revenue without severely or negatively impacting their citizens. But with that being said, helping those states that are thinking about coming online is one of the things that we're trying to do anytime we hear that's being considered. But also on a federal level, I think the two primary things we've been trying to work on, although neither one of them got in the latest version of hopefully the new COVID omnibus bill. One is the Safe Banking Act and the other is the MORE Act. Both seem to have decent support. I'd say there's probably more bipartisan support on the MORE Act side, but everything we hear is that both of those will be stalled and will not be addressed on the House or Senate floor till after the election. But both of them have very meaningful potential impacts to our industry. One on the banking and capital markets side, that being the SAFE Act, and then more just a general impact to criminal justice reform and social equity in the MORE Act. And the thing that really excites us as an industry about the MORE Act in general is one of the main caveats there is it would remove cannabis from the controlled substance classification, which ultimately then has an impact on everything underneath it from a regulatory and banking standpoint.
What's next for Revolution Global? So tell us a little bit more about your plans, for the company going forward.
Sure. So Adam, one of the things that Revolution is focused on in the short and medium term is simply growth. As I said very early on, we're an emerging company in an emerging industry. So as a lot of us have matured, one of the things we realized very quickly, because there was some old school irrational exuberance, through 2018 and going public and all that stuff. What we've seen over the last 18 to 20 months is getting back to what we consider traditional business kind of rules, if you will. Having clean balance sheets, being EBITDA positive, having very little debt, things that make a company in any industry healthy or worthy of understanding valuation and justification for investment. So with that being said, our company has worked very hard in making sure that we are in that state meaning clean balance sheet, very little debt, positive EBITDA. All those things are wonderful, but what they do is they lay the groundwork for the growth that I alluded to. So there are several states that we're in. We like to focus on states that are highly regulated for a number of different reasons. One of which is if we're working hand in hand with a legislature and a regulatory authority that is strict, that then in turn justifies investment capital into that industry, because we know by default, and the biggest basic example is we're not competing with the black market. And that's always going to be something that's, we want to ensure as we're moving something forward within a state, that we're not taking excessive capital risk on our investors' behalf. And why that is important, if you pivot back and you look at some other states that don't quite have that piece fully defined, what we don't want to do is find ourselves in a situation where we've accessed products by accident that we don't know their origin or their safety, and then all of a sudden put them into consumers' hands, and the consumer has nobody to look to for relief or satisfaction if something were to adversely happen in that environment. And so we like to not only seed to sale track everything we make, we do that hand in hand with the regulatory authorities that we operate within those states. But the best thing that we like about our industry is that most of the places we operate, if it's not required, we do it on our own, which is third-party testing. The concept of truth and labeling in our industry is what is going to be the paradigm changer for cannabis relative to other consumable industries. It's the first time, in our opinion, that you're going to have mandated, almost farm-to-table visibility where the consumer knows where something came from, what's in that bottle or that jar, and are there pesticides, is there mold, things that are important for them to understand what they don't want in their bottle. So those are the kinds of things that we continue to focus on that we think are important as we look at the triangulated relationship between laws, operating, and our responsibility to our consumers.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, this has been great. So that being said, if somebody is listening to this and they want to follow the progress of Red Revolution Global and to connect with the brand overall, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the best way to do that is if you look at our website. We constantly keep our PR and our news up to date there. We have an info @ where people can write in and ask us questions and ultimately get forwarded to the right person if an answer is or assistance is needed. We tend to take our responsibility not just to the social equity community, but to all consumers very, very seriously. And we try to be real-time responsive, and we want to make sure that even if it's questions, not, I need some kind of consumer help, but helping anybody who's interested in cannabis and understanding, anything that pops into our head is something that we want to be a resource for. So to get back to your question, Adam, come to our website at revolutionglobal.net.org. It should all funnel there very well and easily for the consumer. And obviously, Adam, if you hear from any of your listeners and want to forward them on, Revolution is there to answer any questions they may have.
Perfect. Well, hey, Mark, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about all the great things going on over at Revolution Global, and also, keying us in on or providing a way for us to all know what's going on in cannabis cultivation, what's changing in policy in the U.S. I mean, all big topics that affect a big portion of the population. So great stuff there. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Leave me a review on the Apple iTunes store. And if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Business, definitely give us a subscribe there, but also leave us some comments on the video. Love to know what kind of projects and things that you're working on. And Mark, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you to Mission Matters, and thank you to all your listeners.